But I remember being part of the church, the meeting in one of the smaller rooms upstairs, and just working through some things. And then I recall when you moved to your current building and just being part of the church there. And I'm looking forward to being part of what you're doing tomorrow. This is great fun, but I'm looking forward to tomorrow, being in the house and just experiencing what God is doing there. So a number of years I kind of go back. I was so tall. I'm not much taller now. I was a lot younger. This grey hair was blonder. The waistline wasn't as full as it is now, but I think that comes with age and poor discipline and a number of things, liking the wrong things and indulging in the wrong things. My family love Southampton. I know you're Winchester, but they love Southampton for two reasons. The first reason is we often sail out of Southampton when we go on a cruise as a family. But the other thing they love about Southampton, now they used to love Family Church when Paul and Janice were at Family Church. I got out of trouble there. But the other thing that they really love is Sprinkles, the ice cream place. Yes. And you look shocked. Thinking, this person talking about ice cream. But love Sprinkles, so we would often kind of say, hey, this is where we are. So when I sent a little message this morning to my family on our family WhatsApp, and I said, this is the view from the office today, and I then honed in a little bit more to the cruise ships, and I said, and in a week, in about 30 days' time, we'll be sailing out of Southampton on a cruise, so we will be sailing past this wonderful venue as well. And then I took a picture of the park for my grandchildren. The first message that came back was this: how far are you from Sprinkles? And then the second question was, will you be going to Sprinkles? And the next comment was, Jackie, no. My wife, no. You won't be going to Sprinkles. So, over the course of that last session, I apologise if I rambled a little bit. I felt that I was racing, but I wanted to really challenge the church this morning about climbing mountains. I took it from Psalm 24, who may ascend the mountain of the Lord, who may stand in his holy place, clean hands and a pure heart. I then began to look at a few of the mountains which we can experience and climb. I talked about discovering the mountain of rest. And then I talked about identifying the mountain of contest. And then I talked about the mountain of sacrifice. And I want to thank Peter, it is Peter, isn't it? Who just shared some of his experiences as I came in and just kind of related to, this is where I'm at and this is what I've gone through. And I want to commend that man, maybe silent, but he just really encouraged me this morning in sharing his story that helped me to identify my story. So thank you for that this morning. And I think the power of what we're trying to achieve and accomplish here this morning is not necessarily what is said from the front by the person who's holding the microphone, but what will really influence this morning and during the course of the day is those little one-to-one conversations. How I can have a conversation with somebody and they in turn will have a conversation back with me, and it will be like sharpening, and it will be very prophetic as well, and it will be really helpful to identify that. And if we put ourselves into what I call receive mode, to receive from God, from other people, at the same time God will use us to encourage somebody else. So don't kind of think that danishes and coffees and teas are incidental. They're not. God uses danishes, coffees and teas to speak to people. Does that make sense? Brilliant. And if I can pray with you during the course of today, I'll make myself available to set some time aside to pray with you as well. Okay. Other mountains in the Bible that will help us. We've talked about the mountain of rest. We've talked about the mountain of sacrifice. We've talked about the mountain of contest. There are loads that we could focus on. I was just thinking a little bit about what is called Mount Sinai, otherwise known as Mount Horeb, and that was the place where Moses encountered God, and God spoke to him. It was also the place where God spoke to the children of Israel and made covenant with them, made a promise, made a vow to them, and they then began to live out that vow and that promise. And maybe in this room this morning there are those of us who just need to hear God's voice. And we need to identify our mountain, Mount Sinai, in a sense where we can go and we can meet with him. And he can give us some direction, he can bring some clarity to where we're at. And also what I noticed about this mountain, it was the mountain of commissioning, where God commissioned him for his assignment, his task, his adventure, his sense of calling and ministry. And I want to encourage you this morning that you need to hear God's voice about what he wants you to do. Too many people are doing what they want to do when we should be listening to God's voice and directing our steps in accordance to his voice of this is what God wants us to do. Now maybe in this room this morning there are some of us who are more mature in age. Old. A little bit more mature when it comes to experience, and maybe you might be saying to yourself, well, I'm of the age where I can't do anything more from God or for God. That's a lie. Because as long as we are breathing, as long as we have blood running through our veins, pumping through our veins, there's a sense of purpose and calling upon our lives. During the course of ministry that Jackie and I have been involved in, we have often come to that place where we say, God, we need to have a burning bush experience. We need to hear your voice clearly. We need to go to that mountain place where we know that you've got our attention, you've got our focus, we are all ears, our heart is open to what you have to say and what you're directing us to do. And I remember having that calling, hearing that audible, kind of internal audible voice that came from God at the age of 16 when I was at a Pentecostal church in Birmingham. I was studying in Birmingham and attended a church called Hoxley Pentecostal Church. It was a church that was well advanced in its time and was almost out of sync with other churches in our nation. It was a church that was led by two lady pastors, very prophetical ladies, cutting edge ladies. And I remember hearing the voice of God just saying, Ian, you come from a great heritage and a great line. Your father, phenomenal individual. Your mother, an amazing lady. But I have a call of God for you. And you can't live on your parents' experience. You have to live and you have to outwork the experience and the calling that I have for your life. And I remember that distinctly, and I remember just kind of saying, okay, God, I give myself to you to serve you in whatever capacity, whatever shape or form that may lead. And that's been exciting. We've been involved in local church, in a supportive ministry. We planted a church 29 years ago. We've seen phenomenal growth over the course of that period of time. During that period of time, also representing Assemblies of God on the road, working alongside other churches and helping them grow and helping them develop. And at the age of 55, realizing it was time to relinquish the role of senior leadership and transitioning it to a next generation, a new generation, and just hearing that voice of God again. Just saying, this is what you have to do, Ian. Are you obedient? Are you willing to do that? And just transitioning that into another season and another time. But there's still life inside of you. And there's still a sense of calling upon your life. And once again, just having to rediscover that mountain where God was going to speak to me distinctly. And out of nowhere, in my plans and my thinking, but in the very heart of what God was thinking and what God was planning, a call to serve as a chaplain within the National Health came and was offered and presented. And that's the season that I now find myself in, serving in the capacity of Deputy Lead Chaplain for our community. I want to encourage you that no matter what age you are, you need to find your Mount Sinai, where God speaks to you, God directs you. God equips you for the next season of your life. Think of another mountain in the Bible. It's the Mount of Olives. I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity, privilege to go to what we would call the Holy Land and to walk through some of these geographical locations and places. But at the base of the Mount of Olives is the Garden of Gethsemane. It was the place where Jesus prayed. And if you begin to look into that whole term of what Gethsemane means, it simply means it's the place of pressing. The place where the olives were pressed to create the pure olive oil. Can I encourage us this morning that if we're going to see our community won for Jesus, if we're going to see our families transformed and changed for the better, we need to find that mountain of prayer, where we pray, where we intercede, where we experience the pressing, and we experience that God answers and hears and answers our prayer. Other mountains in the Bible, as we begin to explore more into the New Testament, there's the Mount of Beatitudes. Remember that story? Where Jesus stands on the side of a mountain and preaches this amazing preach all about the characteristics and the blueprint of life. And oftentimes we talk about it shaping and forming and how we should live our lives. We need to find that mountain where God instructs us and shows us how we are to live our life. If you want the best model to be the best husband possible, you find it in the Bible. If you're looking for the best model of a wife, you can find it in the Bible. You can also go to Paul and Janice and they'll give you all the answers. Jackie and I celebrated our 37th wedding anniversary on Thursday. She went to work, I went to work. We then went out for lunch yesterday. I know it was a day late, but we went out for lunch yesterday. And then I get in my car and drive here. What a wonderful blueprint of how to keep a harmony in your marriage there. Think about the Mount of Zion, where it talks about a profound prophetic statement of significance of what the future is going to look like. It has historical value and it has future value to it as well. The Mount Zion talks about God's presence and his kingdom coming. I want to encourage you to really nurture and to value the presence of God in your life. Be close to him, walk closely with him. I think of Mount Tabor, which is the Mount of Transfiguration, when Jesus and his disciples some of his disciples went to the Mount of Transfiguration and they saw the wonderful setting and the wonderful scene there. And some of his disciples said, let's stay here, let's pitch a tent here. But they didn't, because they realized that there was still a task for them to do down at the bottom of the mountain. I think of where Moses on Mount Nebo, he kind of stood on the mountain and he looked across the promised land. He was close enough, but he wasn't close enough, if that makes sense. He saw what the promised land looked like, but he never had the opportunity of getting into it. I want to discover that mountain where I'm constantly reviewing and surveying the promises that God has for me. But I don't just want to see them from a distance, I want to experience them firsthand and up front. But the mountain I want to spend a few moments on is found in Joshua chapter 14. I love the book of Joshua and the adventures that we see in this book. There are 12 spies. 10 of them go into the land and bring back a negative report. They present a negative report to Joshua. To Moses. But there are 2 positive reports. One is by Joshua and one is by Caleb. And Caleb is the age of 40 when he goes and he surveys the land. And he goes and he brings that great report back. And he's promised an allocation of land. But time passes by. And then we begin to read a little bit further on in Scripture. Caleb reaches the age of 85. Now you need to understand that I'm Cornish by birth. Okay? I'm West Country. And there's a little saying, it says, those that are born in the West Country are strong in the hand but weak in the head. So my maths isn't brilliant. I'm dyslexic, which you most of you already discovered by the way I'm talking this morning. But my calculation says this, that if you take 40 away from 85, that's 45. Is that correct, Mr. School Teacher? Good. So for 45 years, Caleb held on to a promise. Held on to a promise. Didn't give up. Didn't discard that promise, but held on to the promise. And at the age of 85, he stands before the authority and he says this, I'm as strong now as I was when Moses sent me on that journey. I can still travel and I can still fight as well now as I did then. Then he uses his terminology in these words. Give me this mountain that the Lord has promised me. Maybe I travelled 137 miles and I'll travel another 137 miles to go back home tomorrow afternoon simply to deposit that bomb into this setting. That you and I need to climb and to ascend the mountain. And we need to begin to search our hearts and search our situation and search our now and begin to recall the mountains that God promised you. Because I'm looking across our congregation this morning from different nationalities, different walks of life, different generations, but we all serve the same God. And I would anticipate and I would say that in this wonderful setting this morning, there are those of us who are still holding on to a promise. And that promise was given to us when we were in our teens. Or that promise was given to us when we were in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And next year I'll be 60. And then I can say 60. Or maybe there are those in this room this morning that God gave you a promise 70 years ago. Maybe 80 years ago. And you've not necessarily seen that promise fulfilled yet. I stand before you this morning and encourage you to claim that mountain. Caleb didn't lose heart. Caleb didn't become disillusioned. Caleb didn't say, I made that up. He knew he had heard from God. And he was holding on to that promise. Promise that God gave to Jackie and I when we first set out in relationship and courting and then marriage and then family was that as for us, we would serve the Lord. As for us and our household, we would serve the Lord. We have 4 amazing children. Bethany, married to Rob, and she has 3 children. Boaz, Mercy, and Ottilie. Have an amazing son called Jordan. He's married to Naomi. They have 2 children. That's Maya Joy, and it's Etta. And they're expecting their 3rd child in September. Another little girl on the way. I have a daughter called Hannah. Beautiful daughter. Stunning in looks and appearance. Beautiful in nature, very pastoral, very gentle. She's married to Morgan. He's a sportsman. He plays a lot of rugby. He plays a lot of cricket. And he just loves the whole sporting world. And they have a little girl called Ivy. I have another son called Reuben. Reuben is our youngest. He's 25. He'll be 26 in the month of November. He is in love with music. He loves his guitar. He's part of the Worship Central Band, and he's part of the Holy Trinity set up a network. He's very involved in that whole arena. Hasn't discovered girls yet, just loves his music. So ladies, if you're available and you're looking for a 25-year-old, I can possibly put you in touch with him at a fixed price. Comes with. 3 of our children are serving God, loving God. 1 child. Not yet serving God in the way that we know she can and she will do. You see, God gave me a promise. Ian, as for you and your house, you'll serve the Lord. Okay, if that's a promise, why am I not necessarily seeing that promise yet? What's wrong there? What have I done wrong? What have they done wrong? Nothing like that. It's just a case of today, in front of you, I make myself transparent. I make myself vulnerable before you this afternoon, and I simply say this: I'm claiming that mountain. Amen. I'm claiming that mountain. That mountain is called Hannah. Her husband's called Morgan. The little girl's called Ivy. I'm claiming that that mountain will one day be conquered and climbed as she comes back to God. Can I let you into a little secret? This morning I come and I've sat on this seat here, and I've placed my bag on that seat there. Why have I placed my bag on that seat there? Very, very simple, very, very easy this morning. Firstly, I like space. I like to have a little bit out of our room. But you see, this morning as we worshipped, that was my seat. And this morning I saved the seat for my daughter. Because this mountain is coming back. You need to save some seats for your family. You need to claim the mountain and saying, this mountain will be mine. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. And it came as a bit of a shock. I had one of those ugly moles on my back that I didn't see. And because I didn't see it, I didn't do anything about it. Because I didn't see it, I chose not to investigate it or to go and have it dealt with. And just on one occasion, coming out of the shower, now please don't go there in your imagination, but as I got out of the shower and I just started to dry, I just thought, oh, that's uncomfortable, what is that? And went and asked my wife, and she said, yeah, it needs to be looked at, needs to be dealt with. At the same time, we were just working through. My father was dying. My father had cancer, and he was on his deathbed, and we were just working that through. My father passed away 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago now. And I remember just going to see the doctor, and the doctor said, it doesn't look very healthy, Ian, we're going to deal with this. And he dealt with it and came back as cancer, had to go and have lymph nodes removed, and they came back with some mixed reports and all sorts of things such as that. And I remember sitting around my father's dying deathbed with other family members, processing, Ian, you've got cancer. The man in front of you is dying with cancer. And the outcome of this will be death. So if that's the outcome for your father, the outcome for you is also going to be death. And you're just working this stuff through. But then I remember the promise that God gave to me when I was younger. And it was this, that I would bear fruit in old age. And that I would have a long and fruitful life. And I thought, God, I refuse to climb the mountain of negativity. And I refuse to conquer that mountain when you've already given me a mountain of victory. Amen. And I remember having to go through all of the tests and having to go through some treatments and having all sorts of things done, and even having a check again on Wednesday, having a 3-year check and having other scans, and the consultant just looking across and saying, you have a clean bill of health. And we don't need to now see you for another 12 months. And I walked out and I said, thank you. You have given me the mountain. Maybe in this room this morning there are those of us who need to claim the mountain when it comes to our family. There are others that need to claim the mountain when it comes to your health. Remember coming to the end of serving as senior leader of the church there in Torquay, knowing that we were going to transition at the end of the year, have the Christmas break, and then our son would be taking on the church in the new year. But felt really stirred by God to relinquish the finances before I relinquished the role. And that's okay for me, because I got the revelation of that. But when I went to the church and I said, I'm going to come off the salary of our church at the end of May, and we'll serve from May to the end of December, free. We'll do this voluntary. We'll still do what we're doing, but we'll do it voluntary. It's okay when I've got the revelation of that, because that's my mountain. But then you've got to go and tell the wife. And you've got to sit opposite her and you've got to say, I'm sensing this. And Jackie, for those of you who know my wife, she's very practical. She's very pragmatic in the way that she processes things. She's a processor. I don't process things. I just kind of do it and then live the consequence afterwards. Or I do it and then she rectifies it. And I remember her looking across the room, across the table, and it went silent. And I've discovered this, that when it's silent in my house, I'm either in trouble or God's going to speak. And God began to speak through Jackie's conversation. And she said, if that's what you've heard from God, then that's what we will do. Went to the church, told the church, this is what we're going to do. It will be a lesson of faith, for an exercise of faith on our behalf, but it will also be a lesson of faith for you as you take on the leadership of the church. And within a space of 24 hours, the phone goes. It's the National Health saying, we hear you've got a little bit of free time on your hands, or free time is coming up. Will you give us some time to help strategize and to design chaplaincy across the county? Will you do this for us? And I said, yeah, I'll have a conversation with you, thinking it was going to be voluntary. And then 15 minutes into the conversation, I realized that actually this is a paid role. And I said to them, what do you want? And they said, we want you full time. And I said, well, I can't give you full time. I'll give you 2 days a week. They looked back at me and they said, we can't afford to have you just for 2 days. We want a minimum of 3. So we negotiated on 2.5. But once again, I just remember a mountain that God promised me, that he would be my provider. And I claimed that mountain. And I finished on the finances of the church at the end of May. And I started the new role on the 1st of June. Not a break in salary. And the blessing of God and the favour of God was absolutely amazing. I just claimed the mountain. Maybe in this room this morning there are those of us who just need to claim the mountain when it comes to God's provision. Give me this mountain. Give me the mountain of my daughter, I pray, Lord. Give me the mountain of my health, my continued health. And give me the mountain of your provision. You see, Caleb's bold request of give me this mountain is still relevant today. I still pray for mountains. Because I believe that there are opportunities and possibilities and probabilities that God has spoken to me and to Jackie that we still need to claim. And I believe that even in this room this morning, there are many in this room that need to reclaim those mountains. It's a mountain of faith. It's a mountain where you're going to encounter God, and God is going to commission you. When we claim mountains, we're positioning ourselves and we're saying to God, God, will you give us fresh opportunity? Opportunities are those tangible chances we encounter, those divine appointments that God has placed in our path. And they require our action, and they require our trust in God's timing. And when we begin to take those mountains and we begin to claim those mountains. We're taking a step of faith and reminding ourselves that God is the God of opportunity. And no matter how small that opportunity will be or presents itself to be, we're going to embrace it because we know that God will reveal himself to us. This morning, in this house, in this place, claim the mountain that God gives you more opportunity. Just bow your heads for a few moments, if you would. We're going to do a series of prayers during the course of this few moments, and then we're going to have a little bit of worship towards the end. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create some time of ministry and prayer. Lord, help us to recognize and seize the opportunities before us. The opportunities that you place before us. And grant us the courage and the wisdom to act in faith.